They said I was overreacting. Just a wedding, nothing worth losing sleep over. Except the bride was my own sister, and I wasn't even on the guest list. 150 people were invited, but not me, the sister who had carried her through every heartbreak, every crisis, every single mess she ever made. The text message that cut wasn't about a seat at a wedding. It was about being erased. It was about being told, in 7 simple words, that there was no place for me. I'd spent my whole life being the one who fixed things, the one they called when everything fell apart. And in that moment, I realized my role was never that of a family member, just a convenience. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you'd consider subscribing to my channel, it would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. They said I was overreacting, just a wedding, nothing worth losing sleep over. Except the bride was my own sister, and I wasn't even on the guest list. 150 people invited, but not me, the sister who had carried her through every heartbreak, every crisis, every single mess she ever made. The truth that cut wasn't about a seat at a wedding. It was about being erased. It was about being told, in 7 simple words, that there was no place for me. I'd spent my whole life being the one who fixed things, the one they called when everything fell apart. And in that moment, I realized my role was never that of a family member, just a convenience. My name is Olivia. I'm 32 years old. And if you were to ask my family, I'm the one who always knew how to make the world work when they couldn't. My younger sister, Charlotte, believed the world ran on Dad's checkbook. And my mother, the matriarch who took credit for every good deed she ever managed to delegate, was convinced everything was solved with a well-timed lecture on gratitude. I was the silent engine, the one who patched up the silent disasters no one else wanted to acknowledge. When Charlotte lost her first job at 23, I was the one who showed up with takeout and a pile of cardboard boxes. 2 months later, when she was laid off again, I quietly transferred half my savings to her rent account and negotiated with the utility company to get the late fees waived. I built a spreadsheet to track her finances and even helped her craft the perfect resume. Jake, our younger brother, was the only one who seemed to see me. He'd reach for my hand under the dinner table, a silent acknowledgement that he saw my invisible work, the glue that held everything together. Mom and I had a well-rehearsed dance. I'd bring my honest feelings to the conversation, and she'd transform them into a lesson on sacrifice. If I ever mentioned being hurt when Charlotte forgot my birthday, Mom would sigh and say, "She's under so much stress. Sweetie, just be the bigger person." It was always about what I could do for them, never what I needed for myself. The news of Charlotte's engagement arrived like a confetti storm. One moment, we were having a casual dinner. The next, she was waving a diamond ring in front of our faces. We were trying wedding cakes by Tuesday. And by Thursday, I was building budget spreadsheets, negotiating discounts on venues, and mediating a conflict with Aunt Lisa's side of the family. "You're the best," Charlotte texted, her thumb still busy with a text message to the florist. I didn't need a parade or a toast. All I wanted was a chair at the table that wasn't a folding chair tucked away in the back, obscured by a pillar. All I wanted was a thank you that wasn't an afterthought, just a moment where they would look me in the eye and truly see me. I always believed that's what family was, for you do what you have to do. And in the end, the scales would balance out. But the scales always seemed to be tipped in their favor. One humid July afternoon, after a 12-hour workday, I came back to the apartment I paid for by brown bagging my lunch and foregoing the small luxuries I had so readily afforded Charlotte. My phone buzzed with a flurry of messages from the bridesmaids group chat. The notifications were relentless, buzzing with talk of flowers and dress fittings. A new message from Charlotte popped up on my lock screen. "Just wanted to let you know." The preview read. I opened it and read it again. Thinking I'd missed a word, I read it slowly, hearing her voice in my head as if it could soften the blow. "Just wanted to let you know. We've finalized the guest list and had to make some tough cuts. My eyes stung as a wave of heat washed over my face, the meaning sinking in. My name, my very presence, had become a line item, crossed off with a red pen. It was a budget decision, a sacrifice, and the one who had sacrificed for them her entire life was the first to be cut. My fork, halfway to my mouth, dropped onto the coffee table with a clatter. It was a white flag. Everything was normal, except the hinge inside of me, the one that always swung open to say yes, had rusted and seized. I typed a message, deleted it, and typed again. I tried to be funny. When did I become a distant relative? I tried to be direct Charlotte. I'm your sister. Nothing was sent. I could already hear Mom's disappointed sigh, the one that made me shrink back into a petulant child. Oh, Olivia, don't be so dramatic. It's just a wedding. My phone buzzed again. A series of hearts sent in the group chat. A video of the venue being posted. The message was still there, a glaring beacon, challenging me to accept that love could be transactional. And to call it logistics. I flipped my phone over and listened to my heart thrumming in my throat. I picked it up again, as if the pixels might have rearranged themselves while I wasn't looking. They hadn't. I called Mom. Her voice was bright, as if she were frosting a cake. I simply said, I got a text from Charlotte. I'm not on the list. She sighed. A small, weary sound. Oh, honey, it's just a wedding. Our conversation followed the same old script. After I hung up, I sat there, thinking about all the years I had carried Charlotte's burdens. But the message on my phone told a different story to her. I wasn't a sister, I was a choice. A person who could be overlooked, discarded. I didn't want to fight for a seat at a table where I wasn't welcome. If they didn't want me at the wedding, then fine, I wouldn't be there. But I also wasn't going to sit around feeling miserable while they played happy family without me. My laptop was still open on the coffee table. I opened a new browser tab and searched for flights. I didn't know where I was going, only that it had to be far from Ohio. I had a savings account for a someday. Someday was today. I booked a 5-star resort in the Caribbean, a suite overlooking the ocean, all inclusive. I didn't blink when I pressed confirm. 2 weeks later, on the morning of the wedding, I was pulling my suitcase through the airport. Vikwa toy la hangnat. Motsu nuong chiu matruok de toy da goila liolin. Nung homne no kam they nu kong li. When the flight attendant handed me a glass of champagne, I took it with both hands. I snapped a picture. My legs stretched out, the glass held high, and the glittering clouds outside the window. I captioned it, guess I didn't make the guest list, but I think I'll be just fine. I posted it, and the reaction was instantaneous. My cousin Jake sent a string of laughing emojis, and of course, my mother sent 3 texts in a row, Olivia. Where are you? You're really missing your sister's wedding over this. You're being so petty. I took a sip of champagne and muted the conversation, because for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful. As the plane lifted off, the world below shrank. Ohio was a patchwork quilt, the chaos of the wedding disappearing into the distance. Finally, I was free. Over the weekend, I couldn't resist turning my phone back on. The screen lit up immediately, dozens of missed calls, a flurry of text messages. My mom, Charlotte, my cousin Jake, even numbers I didn't recognize. At first, I laughed, but then something shifted in my chest. These weren't just wedding well wishes. Something had definitely gone wrong. A notification from my Aunt Melissa popped up. You won't believe what just happened. I opened the message, and the news came in a torrent. The groom had walked out in the middle of the reception after a huge argument. He actually left the text from Jake, from my Uncle Rob, from my mom. All of them carried a single note of panic. We need you here. You always know how to calm her down. They wanted me. The one they had decided wasn't important enough to have a seat at the ceremony, to come and rescue their chaotic reception. I took a slow sip of my mojito, and a slow, deliberate smile spread across my face. For the first time in her life, Charlotte needed me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to give her what she wanted. A message from Charlotte still lingered on my phone. Please, I need you. I stared at it, trying to remember the sound of her voice when she needed me. But all I could see was the text from a few weeks ago, tough cuts. Hope you understand. I lifted my hand, and without thinking, I tapped the screen. Sorry, I'm a bit busy enjoying my overreaction. I sent it. Then, I blocked her number. I did the same to my mother. The silence that followed was glorious, hundreds of miles away. I imagined the scene at home, Charlotte in tears, makeup running down her face, my mother pacing, relatives shouting at each other, searching for me like a lost key. And me. I was on a lounge chair, my face turned towards the sun. It was petty, it was vindictive, but it was magnificent. I booked 7 more days. Another week to indulge in the infinity pool and the tropical cocktails. Then I took a picture of my footprints in the sand and posted it with a caption, "No regrets." I was no longer their problem solver. I was no longer their scapegoat. I was done. When I returned, I sat in my apartment, the air still smelling of salt, and I wrote, not for them, but for me. I wrote about the betrayal, the rebellion, and the release. How that one text message had opened something inside of me that would never close again. How I had spent a lifetime trying to be the woman they wanted me to be. But now, I was the woman I chose to be. I was no longer afraid. I was ready. I stood on my apartment balcony, the mug of coffee warm in my hands. The city was still waking up, a soft gray light just beginning to creep over the horizon. The air was cool, and I could hear the distant hum of traffic, the world going on without me. It felt surreal, this quietness. For so long, my days had started with a knot in my stomach, a vague anxiety about what disaster awaited me. Would Charlotte call needing money? Would Mom need me to smooth over another one of her social faux pas? I was always holding my breath, waiting for the next crisis. The next demand, my value, my sense of self, was tied to how well I could fix someone else's life. But standing there, the sun a gentle wash of gold spreading across the sky, I realized I wasn't holding my breath anymore. I was breathing deep, unhurried, my lungs filling and emptying with no weight pressing against them. The silence was not empty. It was full. It was full of my own thoughts, my own plans, my own future. It was a silence I had earned. I closed my eyes and let a memory surface, one that had haunted me for years. I was 15, sitting on the floor of our living room. Charlotte had just broken Mom's prized porcelain vase, a gift from our grandmother. She was sobbing, a small, terrified thing. Without a second thought, I had taken the blame. Mom had lectured me for what felt like hours. But in the end, she had wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You're such a good big sister, Olivia. You know how to protect your family." In that moment, I felt like a hero. But now, looking back, I see it for what it was, the precise moment I learned to sacrifice myself for their approval. I learned that my self-worth was directly proportional to my ability to absorb their mistakes. It was the first link in the chain that would bind me for years. Another memory flickered by. I'd canceled a trip with friends to stay home with Charlotte when she had a bad flu. "Your sister needs you more than they do," Mom had said, and I had believed her. I had believed that love was measured in my sacrifices. And now, all these years later, sitting alone on my balcony, the years of self-denial and misplaced loyalty felt like a physical weight on my shoulders. I had given away so many chances, so many small pieces of myself, and for what to be a tool they could use when needed, and then discard. A part of me, a small, trembling part, wanted to go back. The fear of an entirely new life without them was real, visceral. I remembered the laughter, the holidays, the comforting familiarity of their chaos. Was I doing something irrevocably cruel? Should I give them one more chance? Because after all, they were my family. But then, the thought that had been a whisper became a roar. If I went back, everything would repeat. I would again become the fixer, the scapegoat. I would give up my newfound peace, living in a constant state of anxiety and fear of being abandoned again. This time, the sacrifice would not bring me a hero's welcome. It would only be a return to a gilded cage. I looked out at the vast ocean, the waves rolling in with a steady, unhurried rhythm. The ocean didn't judge me. It didn't ask anything of me. It was just there, a promise of a world bigger than the one I had known. And in that moment, the choice was no longer a choice. It was a simple truth. I would not go back. I would not apologize. I would not explain. I had chosen freedom. I had chosen myself. It was the only right thing I had ever done. The sun crested the skyline, light spilling over rooftops, and for a moment I felt reborn, not as the forgotten middle child, not as the fixer, not as the scapegoat, just me, Olivia. I closed my eyes, let the warmth kiss my face, and smiled. For once, I wasn't the forgotten sister. I was the author of my own life, and I had no regrets. With that final sunrise, I closed the chapter on years of being overlooked and finally stepped into my own freedom.